They clinked crystal champagne glasses in the first-class lounge, mocking my frayed tactical backpack like it was a prop for a clown act. My father patted my shoulder, telling me to play security guard while the real earners enjoyed the world. He did not realize that in 72 hours, his glittering reality would collapse. The only face with the power to decide their survival on global television would be the failure of a daughter he left behind. My name is Sage Whitestone, and for the last 10 years, I have existed as a ghost within my own bloodline. I stood before the towering mahogany doors of the Whitestone estate in Connecticut, a sprawling architectural beast of white stone and cold ambition that my father liked to call a home. It was late November, and the air bit at my cheeks with a sharpness that usually reminded me of high-altitude training. But here, it just felt like the house itself was exhaling its disapproval. I was 34 years old. I was a major in the United States Space Force. I commanded assets worth billions of dollars and held a security clearance that would make a senator weep. Yet, as I reached for the brass doorknob, I felt that familiar, suffocating weight settle in my chest. To the people inside this fortress, I was nothing more than a glitch in their perfect algorithm. I smoothed down the front of my gray sweater. It was cashmere, high quality but understated, chosen specifically because it was functional. My mother, Linda, would hate it. She hated anything that did not scream its price tag at the top of its lungs. I took a breath, centered myself, and pushed the door open. The foyer was exactly as I remembered it. A cavern of marble and gold leaf that echoed with the click of my boots. A chandelier the size of a small car hung overhead, its crystals catching the light and fracturing it into 1,000 judgmental eyes. "Sage, is that you?" The voice drifted from the grand salon, airy and detached. My mother emerged, holding a glass of white wine as if it were an extension of her hand. At 60, Linda Whitestone was a testament to the miracles of modern dermatology and rigid self-denial. She looked me up and down, her smile faltering for a microsecond before she pasted it back on. "You made it," she said, offering her cheek for a kiss that never quite landed. "And you are wearing that. I thought you might dress up a little. It is a special week. Tyler is home. It is good to see you too." "Mom," I said, my voice low. I had learned long ago to keep my volume down in this house. Any display of emotion was just ammunition. "Your father is in the study," she said, turning back toward the salon. "Try not to disturb him. He's on a call with Tokyo. Big deal. Huge deal." I walked past the study, through the crack in the door. I saw Preston Whitestone pacing behind his massive oak desk. He was a large man, taking up space not just physically but atmospherically. He was shouting about zoning permits and square footage, his face flushed with the adrenaline of the deal. He did not look up. He did not know I was there. Or perhaps he did and simply did not care. I was not a client. I was not a threat. I was just Sage. Dinner was served at 8 o'clock sharp in the formal dining room. The table was long enough to seat 20. But tonight it was just the four of us clustered at one end like survivors on a life raft made of polished wood. The silence was thick, broken only by the scrape of silver against porcelain. Then Tyler arrived. My younger brother burst into the room with the energy of a golden retriever that had just ingested an energy drink. At 29, Tyler was the golden boy, the heir apparent. Despite having never built anything tangible in his life, he was dressed in a suit that cost more than my first car. His hair gelled into a perfect, wind-resistant sculpture. "Sorry I'm late," Tyler announced, not sounding sorry at all. He slid into the chair opposite me, grinning. "Had to take a call. The market is going crazy right now. Crypto never sleeps, right?" He grabbed a bread roll and pointed it at me. "Sage, long time no see. You look tired. They keeping you up late watching the stars?" Preston looked up from his plate, his eyes narrowing as he assessed me. "Tyler is right. You look washed out. Sage, you need some sun. Maybe if you got a real job, you could afford a vacation." I cut a piece of my steak, keeping my movements precise. "My job is real, Dad." Space Force, Tyler snorted, pouring himself a generous glass of red wine. I still cannot believe that is a real thing. It sounds like a bad Netflix series. What do you guys even do? Chase little green men? Fix the Wi-Fi on the International Space Station? He laughed at his own joke. Looking to our parents for validation, Linda smiled indulgently, while Preston let out a short, barking chuckle. It is a valid branch of the military. Tyler, I said, keeping my tone neutral. We manage critical infrastructure, GPS, communications, missile warning systems. Oh, right, Tyler said, waving his hand dismissively. Star Wars stuff, seriously. Sage, look at you. You are 34. You are walking around in a uniform that looks like it was designed for a sci-fi convention, making a government salary. I just bought a new McLaren today, a 720 horsepower beast, 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds. I made the down payment with what I earned in 3 hours of trading this morning. I looked at him. I saw the desperation behind his eyes, the frantic need to prove he was important. He was hollow, filled only with the validation of strangers on the internet and the fluctuating value of imaginary coins. That is nice, Tyler, I said. I am happy for you. Are you? Preston interjected, pointing his fork at me. Because you should be taking notes. Your brother is out there seizing the world by the throat. He is an innovator. And you? You are basically a glorified call center worker. You sit in a dark room staring at a computer screen, waiting for a light to blink. It is administrative work. Sage, it is busy work for people who could not hack it in the real business world. I chewed my steak slowly, tasting the metallic tang of irony. They saw a woman in a gray sweater. They saw a failure. They did not see the truth. They did not know that sitting in a dark room meant I stood watch in the Combined Space Operations Center. They did not know that 48 hours ago, I had authorized the orbital adjustment of a billion-dollar surveillance satellite to track a rogue ballistic missile test in the North Sea. They did not know that the computer screen I stared at held the real-time location of every nuclear asset on the planet. I was the commander of the Defense Satellite Operations Unit. When the world slept, I was one of the few people ensuring it would wake up the next morning. But I could not say that. It is necessary work, I said simply. It is invisible work, Preston countered. And in this family, we do not do invisible. We build towers. We put our name on things. We leave a legacy. Who is going to remember a satellite operator? The people who use their GPS to find their way home, I said. The banks that use the timing signals for their transactions. The pilots who need navigation in a storm. Boring, Tyler sang out. Boring, boring, boring. Come on, sis. Admit it. You are basically playing video games. Pew-pew, laser beams. Linda sighed, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. Please, stop teasing your sister. Tyler, not everyone has your ambition. Someone has to do the grunt work. Sage has always been comfortable in the background. She likes being safe. Safe. The word almost made me laugh. If they knew how many times I had watched a trajectory line turn red, calculating the minutes until impact, wondering if I needed to wake the president. They would not use the word safe. I looked around the table, the crystal glasses, the heavy silver, the floral arrangements that cost more than a private's monthly salary. It was a beautiful tableau of success, and it was incredibly fragile. They believed their money insulated them. They believed their status was a shield. They did not understand that their entire existence, their bank transfers, their flight paths, their internet connection, their power grid, hung by a thread that my team and I held intact. I chose silence. I chose the discipline ingrained in me by the academy and honed by years of classified briefings. Explaining my worth to them was like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. They lacked the frame of reference. So, Preston said, shifting gears. Tyler tells me this new project of his is going to be the next Bitcoin, the Sapphire Chain, was it? Sapphire Chain, Tyler confirmed, puffing out his chest. It is revolutionary. Dad, decentralized finance, total anonymity. We are projecting a 300% return by the third quarter. I watched Tyler's hand shake slightly as he lifted his wine glass. A micro-expression of fear. He was lying, or he was in over his head. I cataloged the data point and filed it away. Suddenly, a vibration buzzed against my thigh. It was not the soft, polite hum of my personal smartphone. It was a sharp, aggressive jolt. My heart rate spiked, but my face remained impassive. I reached into the deep pocket of my slacks and withdrew a black device. It was thicker than a normal phone, encased in reinforced rubber. With no camera and no brand logo, the screen was black, save for a single line of red text. Condition orange. Authenticate. The table went quiet. They had never seen this phone before. "What is that?" Linda asked, wrinkling her nose. "That is the ugliest phone I have ever seen. Is that government issue? Do they not have iPhones in the Space Force?" I ignored her. My thumb scanned the biometric reader on the side. The screen flashed. A chaotic string of code poured down the display, resolving into a coordinate and a timestamp. Threat detected. Sector 4. Silent protocol initiated. This was not a drill. Condition orange meant a credible threat to the constellation. Someone was poking at the grid. I stood up. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor. "I have to take this," I said. My voice was no longer the soft murmur of the dutiful daughter. It had a steel edge to it. "Sage, sit down," Preston commanded. "We are in the middle of dinner. It is incredibly rude to look at your phone, let alone leave the table." "This is urgent," I said. I was already moving toward the door. "Urgent?" Tyler laughed, leaning back in his chair. "What happened? Did the general forget his password? Does he need you to reset the router?" "Tyler," I warned, pausing at the threshold. "Oh, let her go." "Preston," Linda said, waving a hand dismissively. "She probably has to go fix a printer for her boss. You know how it is with these administrative assistants. If they do not jump when the boss calls, they lose their bonus." "Fix a printer," Tyler wheezed, slamming his hand on the table. "That is rich. Go on. Sage, go save the printer. Make sure the paper does not jam. The fate of the galaxy depends on it." The laughter followed me out of the room. It echoed off the marble walls of the foyer, a chorus of ignorance and arrogance. I walked into the dark hallway, the black phone warm in my hand. I did not look back. I did not correct them. I pressed the connect button and raised the device to my ear. "This is Major Whitestone," I said, my voice dropping an octave, stripping away the daughter and leaving only the soldier. "Report," behind me, in the warmth of the dining room. My family continued to eat their steaks and drink their wine, laughing at the girl who fixed printers, completely unaware that the woman in the hallway was the only thing standing between them and the dark. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me, sealing the hallway's chill away, but the atmosphere inside the dining room was far colder than the unheated corridor. I returned to my seat, sliding the black phone back into my pocket. The screen was dark now, but the vibration of the alert still ghosted against my thigh. Condition orange, a credible threat. My mind was already running tactical simulations, calculating orbital decay rates and encryption keys, but physically, I was forced to pick up a silver dessert spoon and pretend that my biggest concern was the consistency of the crème brûlée. My family had moved on without me. In fact, they seemed to have accelerated into a manic state of celebration. The air reeked of caramelized sugar and aggressive self-satisfaction. "It is done," Preston announced, slapping his hand on the table with enough force to make the crystal stemware jump. "I just got the confirmation from the concierge. We are booked." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and withdrew a thick, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold foil. He tossed it onto the center of the table as if he were throwing down a royal flush in a high-stakes poker game. "What is this?" Tyler asked, leaning forward, a smear of custard on his lip. "This, my boy, is the pinnacle," Preston declared. He leaned back, lacing his fingers over his stomach. "To celebrate the sapphire chain hitting its funding goal, and frankly, to get away from the dreary winter of Connecticut, I have booked us a week at the Sapphire Enclave. Linda gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in a theatrical display of delight. Preston, you did not? The Sapphire Enclave? I read about that in Vogue. It is on a private island in the Pacific. It is invitation only. Correct, Preston smirked. And we were invited. It is completely off-grid. No paparazzi, no taxes, no laws except the laws of luxury. They have their own power grid, their own water filtration, even their own security force. It is a sovereign state for the ultra-wealthy. I watched them. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. They were celebrating a trip to an isolated rock in the middle of the ocean. A place that prided itself on being off-grid, at the exact moment a digital blackout was threatening to swallow the Pacific Rim. If the threat matrix I had just glanced at was accurate, that island was about to become less of a paradise and more of a cage. It is perfect, Tyler said, scrolling through something on his phone. I can live stream from the beach. The investors will eat it up. The Sapphire King at the Sapphire Enclave. The branding writes itself. I looked at Tyler. I knew about his sapphire chain. I had run a background check on his partners 3 months ago. It was a classic Ponzi scheme wrapped in buzzwords about decentralized finance and blockchain liberation. He was paying old investors with new money, and the liquidity pool was shallower than a puddle on a hot day. He was not a genius. He was a mark. And he was dragging our parents down with him. But telling them that would only result in accusations of jealousy. Open it, Preston commanded. Nodding at the envelope, Tyler tore open the seal. He pulled out 3 boarding passes. They were heavy, printed on cardstock that felt like silk. First-class suites, Tyler read, whistling low. Singapore Airlines to Fiji, then a private seaplane transfer. Nice, Dad, really nice. Tyler spread the tickets out on the table. 1, 2, 3. He paused, looking into the empty envelope, then looked up at me. Wait, there are only 3. The silence that followed was deliberate. It was a weaponized pause, designed by my father to maximize the impact of what was coming next. Preston took a sip of his wine, savoring the vintage. Before he turned his gaze to me, his eyes were devoid of warmth, filled only with a patronizing pity that was far worse than anger. Ah, yes, Preston said, his voice smooth and heavy like crude oil. About that, he cleared his throat. I did consider inviting you. Sage, truly, I did. I thought about buying a 4th ticket, but then I sat down and really thought about the logistics. He gestured vaguely at me with his wine glass. First of all, I know how demanding your job is. I assume you cannot just take a week off to fly halfway around the world. The government is not exactly known for its generous vacation policies for support staff, is it? You probably have a shift schedule to adhere to. And, let us be honest, Linda chimed in, her voice light and musical, as if she were discussing the weather rather than excluding her daughter. The Sapphire Enclave as well. It is intense, darling. It is the crème de la crème. We are talking about tech moguls, royalty, heirs to empires. Everyone dresses for dinner. Everyone. She gestured at my sweater, her manicured finger tracing a circle in the air. You are comfortable in your utility wear, and that is fine for here, or for the base, or wherever it is you go every day. But there, you would be miserable. You would have to dress up, make conversation with people who own continents. I just did not want you to feel out of place. You would embarrass yourself, and frankly, you would make Tyler look bad in front of potential investors. Exactly, Preston agreed. Tyler is there to close deals. Image is everything. We cannot have you sitting there in a hoodie looking like you just clocked out of a warehouse shift. It sends the wrong message. It says instability. It says low rent. I sat very still. My hands were resting on my lap, hidden beneath the tablecloth. My fingernails were digging into my palms, not out of sadness, but out of a fierce, disciplined restraint. So, Preston concluded, we decided it is best if you stay here. You can look after the house, make sure the pipes do not freeze, Keep the mail from piling up. It will be a nice little staycation for you." They looked at me, waiting. They wanted a reaction. They wanted tears. They wanted me to beg for a ticket, to promise I would buy a dress, to plead for inclusion. They wanted to see the little girl who used to cry when she was left behind. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. The water was cool and clear. "That is fine," I said. My voice was steady, lacking the tremor they were hoping for. I could not have gone anyway. Preston's eyebrows shot up. "Oh? And why is that? Do you have a big filing project due? Inventory count coming up?" "I have a training exercise," I said. It was the standard cover story. "A joint operation. I will be on duty for the next 7 days. Mandatory attendance." Preston laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "A training exercise," he mocked, shaking his head. "God, you make it sound so dramatic. What does that mean? Sage? Practicing how to type faster? Drills on how to unjam the copier under pressure? Or do they have you guarding a supply closet somewhere, making sure no one steals the staplers?" "Something like that," I said. "It is cute." "Really?" Tyler sneered, emboldened by our father's cruelty. "She calls it an operation, like she is a Navy SEAL. Sis, you are an administrator. You push papers. You are not GI. Jane, stop pretending you have some high-stakes life. You are going to be sitting in a cubicle in Nevada eating vending machine sandwiches while we are eating lobster on a private beach. We will send you pictures," Linda promised, patting my hand. "So you can see what you are missing," Preston sighed, the sound of a man burdened by his own generosity. He reached into his jacket pocket again. This time, he pulled out a checkbook. The leather cover creaked as he opened it. He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket, uncapped it, and began to write. The scratching of the nib against the paper was the only sound in the room. Scritch, scratch. He ripped the check out with a flourish and slid it across the polished mahogany table toward me. It spun slightly and came to a stop next to my water glass. I looked down at it. Pay to the order of Sage Whitestone. Amount, $500. Memo, food. "There," Preston said, capping his pen. "I do not want you to starve while we are gone. Buy yourself something nice. Maybe order a pizza, or go to the grocery store and get some of that bulk food you like. Just try not to spend it all in one place." $500. The man had just spent $50,000 on first-class tickets. He was about to spend hundreds of thousands on a week of excess. And he threw $500 at me like I was a beggar on the street corner. It was not a gift. It was a leash. It was a reminder of who held the purse strings, and therefore, who held the power. But he was wrong about the power. I looked at the check. Then I looked at the 3 boarding passes. In my mind, I saw the map of the Pacific. I saw the red warning lights blinking on my console at the base. I saw the trajectory of the malware that was currently eating through the submerged fiber optic cables near the Mariana Trench. They were flying into a blackout. They were flying into a world where money meant nothing because the systems that moved it were about to die. I reached out and picked up the check. The paper felt crisp between my fingers. $500, I repeated. "Don't spend it all on cat food." Tyler snickered. I held Preston's gaze. I did not blink. Slowly, deliberately. I brought my other hand up. Rip! The sound was shockingly loud in the quiet room. I tore the check down the middle. Preston's smile froze. Linda gasped. Tyler's mouth hung open. I put the 2 halves together and tore them again. Rip, and again. Rip. I let the confetti of blue security paper rain down onto the pristine white tablecloth. It looked like snow on a battlefield. "I do not need your money, Dad," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried a resonance that had not been there before. It was the voice of a commanding officer addressing a subordinate who had stepped out of line. "And I do not need your vacation." I stood up. I pushed my chair back, the legs groaning against the floor. "You think I am playing dress-up," I said, looking from Tyler to Linda, and finally resting my eyes on Preston. "You think I am small. You think I am irrelevant because I do not scream for attention." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. Enjoy the Sapphire Enclave, I said. Enjoy the silence. I have a feeling it is going to be very peaceful there. Just remember, when the sun goes down, it gets very dark on those islands. Make sure you know where the flashlights are. Is that a threat? Preston sputtered, his face turning a shade of beet red. You ungrateful little— It is not a threat, I said, straightening up and slinging my backpack over one shoulder. It is a weather forecast. I turned on my heel and walked out of the dining room. Sage, Preston roared behind me. Come back here. Pick up this mess. Do not walk away from me when I'm speaking to you. Let her go, I heard Tyler say. Though his voice sounded uncertain, she is just jealous. She is crazy. I walked through the foyer, past the gold leaf mirror that reflected a woman who did not belong in this house. I opened the heavy front door and stepped out into the night. The cold air hit me like a welcome slap. I walked down the long driveway to where my truck was parked, a beat-up Ford F-150 that I had bought with my own money, maintained with my own hands. It was ugly, reliable, and tough, just like me. I climbed into the cab and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a guttural growl that drowned out the muffled shouting coming from the mansion behind me. I pulled my black phone out of my pocket and mounted it on the dashboard. Command, I said. This is Major Whitestone. I am en route to Base X-ray. ETA 40 minutes. Initiate partial lockdown of Sector 7 and get me a direct line to the Admiral. I shifted into gear and drove away from the marble prison, leaving the Czech and the family behind. They were heading to paradise. I was heading to war. And God help them, because they did not have the clearance to understand the difference, while my family was sipping vintage Dom Perignon at 35,000 feet, enclosed in the leather-wrapped cocoon of a Singapore Airlines first-class suite. I was wrestling my steering wheel against the crosswinds of the Nevada desert. The contrast was not lost on me. Up there, Tyler was undoubtedly reclined fully flat, his phone held aloft as he live-streamed his journey to paradise to his followers. I could imagine the caption, "Hustle hard so you can fly hard. Crypto King, Sapphire Life." He would be panning the camera over the gold-rimmed plates. The personalized service, the illusion of a world without friction. Beside him, my father, Preston, would be lecturing the flight attendant on the proper temperature of the warm nuts, feeling like a king because he had paid for the privilege of being served. Down here, on Route 375, the world was nothing but dust, tumbleweeds, and a silence so profound it felt heavy. My Ford F-150 rattled as I hit a pothole, the suspension groaning in protest. I checked the dashboard clock. 1,400 hours. I was making good time. The landscape around me was barren, a scorched earth of reds and browns that stretched out to the horizon, broken only by the jagged teeth of the mountain range ahead. To the casual observer, the mountain was just another geological formation in the middle of nowhere. To me, it was the front door to the most important room on Earth. I turned off the main highway onto an unmarked dirt road. A sign warned, "Restricted area. Use of deadly force authorized." Most people saw that sign and turned around. I pressed the accelerator. 5,000 miles away, the private seaplane touched down on the azure waters of the Pacific Ocean. The spray kicked up by the pontoons sparkled like diamonds in the tropical sun. "Welcome to the Sapphire Enclave," the pilot announced over the intercom. Preston Whitestone looked out the window and sighed with deep satisfaction. Below them, the resort sprawled across a private atoll like a jeweled necklace. Overwater villas with glass floors, white sand beaches that looked photoshopped, and a central pavilion that architectural magazines had dubbed the eighth wonder of the world. "Now this," Preston said, unbuckling his seatbelt, "is where we belong." They disembarked onto a teak dock where a line of staff in white linen uniforms waited with cold towels and fresh coconut water. Tyler was already filming. "Yo, what is up, guys?" Tyler shouted at his phone screen, spinning around to catch the scenery. "We just touched down at the Enclave. Look at this water. You can see the fish. This is what the Sapphire chain buys you. Total freedom. Linda adjusted her oversized sunglasses and accepted a towel. Oh, Preston, look. That must be the mesmerizing infinity pool they talked about. I need to book a spa treatment immediately. The flight was murder on my skin. Mr. Whitestone. A concierge with a tablet approached, bowing slightly. Welcome. We have upgraded you to the royal villa at the end of the pier. Maximum privacy. Your luggage will be there before you arrive. Excellent, Preston said, puffing out his chest. He looked around, checking to see who else was arriving. He spotted a tech CEO he recognized from a magazine cover and a European countess. He smiled. He was in the right place. He was safe. I pulled up to the gate at the base of the mountain. There was no guard visible, just a camera lens the size of a dinner plate tracking my truck. I rolled down the window and held up my badge. A laser scanned the barcode. Then, a retinal scanner extended from the wall. I leaned forward, letting the red light map the unique pattern of blood vessels in my eye. Identity confirmed. Welcome, Major Whitestone. The rock face in front of me groaned. A section of the mountain, disguised perfectly with fake texturing and brush, began to slide open. It revealed a tunnel of reinforced concrete that plunged deep into the earth. I drove inside. The heavy blast doors sealed shut behind me with a thud that vibrated through the chassis of the truck. The transition was instantaneous. I left the dust and the heat behind. Here, the air was scrubbed clean, cooled to a precise 68 degrees, and smelled of ozone and antiseptic. I parked the truck in the designated officer's bay and stepped out. I walked to the locker room, my footsteps echoing on the metal grating. I stripped off the civilian clothes, the gray sweater my mother hated, the jeans, the boots. I placed them in a locker and closed the door on Sage the daughter. When I turned around, I was Major Sage Whitestone. I pulled on my flight suit. Blue, crisp, flame retardant. I laced up my combat boots. I pinned my rank insignia to my collar. Finally, I placed my access card around my neck. It was a black card with a red stripe, indicating top secret/sensitive compartmented information clearance. I walked out of the locker room and headed for the command center. As I walked down the long, sterile corridors, the atmosphere shifted. Soldiers who were chatting hushed as I approached. They snapped to attention, their backs rigid against the walls. "Major on deck," a sergeant barked. "Carry on," I said, not breaking my stride. I reached the double doors of the operations floor. 2 armed MPS stood guard. They saw me and immediately stepped aside, saluting sharply. "Major," one of them said with genuine respect, "General Vance is waiting for you in the tank." "Thank you, Corporal." I pushed through the doors. The operations floor was a cavernous room filled with rows of consoles, wall-to-wall screens displaying orbital trajectories, and the hum of 100 people working in synchronized chaos. This was the brain of the United States Space Force. "Whitestone," General Vance, a man with 4 stars on his shoulder and a face carved from granite, looked up from the central holographic table. He did not look at me like a disappointment. He looked at me like I was the only person who could solve the problem in front of him. "Sir," I said, walking up to the table and saluting. "Drop the formalities, Sage," Vance said, his voice grim. "Look at this." He pointed to the main screen. A map of the globe was displayed, covered in thousands of tiny green dots representing active satellites. But as I watched, a cluster of dots over the Pacific Ocean blinked from green to red. Then, they vanished. "We are losing eyes," Vance said. "It started 40 minutes ago. Telemetry loss on 3 commercial birds. Then a military comms relay went silent. Now, the GPS constellation covering the Asia-Pacific region is reporting synchronization errors." "Is it a solar flare?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Vance shook his head. "It is code. Someone is injecting a viral payload directly into the maneuvering thrusters. They are not just jamming them. They are physically deorbiting them. They are burning them up in the atmosphere." "Who?" "We are calling them the Blackout Syndicate," Vance said. "We do not know where they are broadcasting from yet, but they are sophisticated. They are bypassing encryption keys that change every 10 seconds. Sage, If they keep this up, they will wipe out global navigation in 12 hours. The banking system, air traffic control, the power grid. It all relies on those timing signals. If the satellites go down, we go back to the Stone Age. I looked at the screen. The red zone was expanding. It was moving east, toward the American West Coast. "Give me the console," I said, my voice steady. "I need to isolate the infection vector." "It is yours," Vance said, stepping back. "You have tactical command, Major." At the Sapphire Enclave, the sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of violent orange and purple. Preston Whitestone sat at a private table in the resort's underwater restaurant. Sharks and manta rays glided past the thick glass walls, observing the diners with cold, unblinking eyes. "To success," Preston toasted, raising a glass of 20-year-old scotch. "To the Sapphire Chain," Tyler added, clinking his glass against his father's. They were joined by a man named Sterling, a venture capitalist Preston had just met at the bar. Sterling was tanned, slick, and wore a watch that cost more than my annual salary. "So, Preston," Sterling said, cutting into his Wagyu beef, "I heard you have 2 children. Tyler here is obviously a chip off the old block. A crypto wizard. What about the other one? A daughter, right?" Preston paused. He took a sip of scotch. Buying time. "Ah, yes," Preston said, his tone dismissive. "Sage, well, she took a different path." "Oh?" Sterling asked politely. "Is she in the family business?" "God, no," Tyler laughed, his mouth full of potatoes. "Sage is barely in business at all. She works for the government, some clerical job in the Space Force. Basically, she files papers and stares at the sky." "Space Force?" Sterling raised an eyebrow. "Sounds interesting." "It is a joke," Preston said, waving his hand. "She wears a uniform, plays soldier, but it is just a glorified desk job. I offered to bring her into the real estate empire, teach her how to actually make money, but she lacks the drive. She is content with mediocrity. It is a shame. Really, I tried to bring her on this trip, show her how the other half lives, but she said she had work." "Work," Linda scoffed from across the table. "She probably just did not want to dress up. Sage has always been a bit antisocial. She prefers machines to people." "Well," Sterling said, losing interest, "not everyone can be a winner, but this Tyler kid? I like his energy." Preston beamed. "Exactly. Tyler is the future." The operations floor was vibrating with tension. I stood at the central command station, my fingers flying across a haptic keyboard. "Sector 4 is compromised," I shouted over the din. "Rerouting traffic to the backup constellation. Lieutenant, cut the uplink to Satellite 49. Do it now, or the virus jumps to the entire defensive grid." "Cutting uplink," a young lieutenant yelled back. On the big screen, a green dot turned gray. We had saved the grid, but we had lost another satellite. "This code is adaptive," I muttered to myself, analyzing the streams of data cascading down my monitor. "It is learning. Every time we build a firewall, it finds a crack." "Major," General Vance said, standing at my shoulder, "intelligence suggests the signal is originating from a mobile server farm. They are bouncing the signal through civilian infrastructure to hide the source." "Civilian infrastructure?" I asked. "Resorts, private islands, places with high-speed independent connections but low-grade corporate security," Vance explained. "They are hijacking the rich to attack the government." My stomach turned over. "Private islands, high-speed connections. Pacific region," I said. "General, show me the density map of active uplinks in the Pacific." The map shifted. A heat map appeared. There were clusters of activity in Hawaii, Fiji, and a very bright, isolated spot in the middle of the ocean. "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the isolated spot. "That is a new ultra-luxury development," the intelligence officer replied. "The Sapphire Enclave, independent satellite uplink, massive bandwidth." I stared at the dot. My family was there. Right now, they were sitting on top of the bomb that was blowing up my sky. Suddenly, My personal phone, which I had left on the corner of the console, buzzed. It was a violation of protocol to have it out, but in the chaos, I had forgotten to lock it away. I glanced at the screen. A text message from Tyler. I unlocked it. It was a picture, a close-up, high-definition shot of a massive lobster tail dripping with butter, sitting on a silver platter. Beside it was a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Hope the army rations aren't too dry. Sis, living the dream. Sorry." Not sorry. I looked at the lobster. I looked at the champagne. Then I looked up at the big screen, where red warning lights were flashing, signaling the potential collapse of the global positioning system. "Major?" General Vance asked, noticing my hesitation. "Everything all right?" I looked at the phone one last time. In that moment, any lingering thread of emotional attachment I had to them snapped. It did not break with a bang. It just dissolved. They were eating lobster while the world burned. They were mocking the firefighter while standing in the arsonist's house. I did not reply. I did not type a warning. I did not tell them to run. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone. The screen went black. The image of the lobster vanished. I walked over to the biometric safe in the wall, opened it, and tossed the phone inside. I slammed the heavy steel door shut and spun the lock. "I am fine, General," I said, turning back to the command console. My voice was ice. "I am ready to engage. What are your orders, Major?" I looked at the map, at the dot labeled Sapphire Enclave. "Isolate the Pacific Rim," I commanded. "Initiate protocol blackout for all civilian sectors in the target zone. Cut their feeds, cut their internet, cut their power if you have to. We need to stop the bleed." "Major," the lieutenant hesitated. "That will leave thousands of civilians stranded without communication, including the Sapphire Enclave." I looked at the lieutenant. My eyes were clear. "I know," I said. "Execute the order." I watched as the lieutenant typed the command. On the screen, the lines connecting the islands to the world began to sever. One by one, at the Sapphire Enclave, in the underwater restaurant, Tyler was holding his phone up to take a selfie with Sterling. "Say wealth!" Tyler grinned. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The music died. Tyler frowned, tapping his phone screen. "What the?" He looked at the signal bars. 0. "Hey," Tyler complained. "The Wi-Fi just died. I was in the middle of an upload." "Probably just a glitch," Preston said, looking around for a waiter to yell at. Back in the mountain, I watched the connection die. The dot representing the enclave went dark. "Target isolated," I said. "Now, let us hunt these bastards down." The silence in the room was heavy, but for the first time in my life, I did not feel the weight of it. I felt light. I was no longer the daughter left behind. I was the one holding the switch, and I had just turned them off. The third day of the vacation dawned with a sky so blue it looked artificial, a cruel backdrop for the catastrophe that was quietly unspooling beneath the surface of the Pacific, at Base X-ray. I had not slept in 36 hours. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and my blood was mostly caffeine, but I remained bolted to the command chair, on the main tactical display. The virus, which we had codenamed Obsidian, was no longer just poking at our satellites. It was aggressively hunting. It had mutated, shifting its focus from disruption to destruction. It was now targeting the handshake protocols between the orbital positioning clusters and the ground-based power grids. "It is trying to bridge the gap," Lieutenant Evans said, his voice tight with suppressed panic. "It is using the compromised commercial uplinks in the Fiji sector to tunnel back into the mainland United States grid. If it jumps the air gap, it hits the Western interconnection. We are talking about a total blackout from Seattle to San Diego." I looked at the map. The infection vectors were glowing angry red lines, pulsing outward from the cluster of private islands where the wealthy were currently sleeping off their hangovers. The Sapphire Enclave was one of the brightest nodes on the board. Its massive, unsecure bandwidth was acting as a superhighway for the malware. "We cannot scrub it fast enough," I said. my voice raspy. The encryption is regenerating. Every time we patch a hole, it drills 2 more. I made the calculation. It was the kind of math they taught us at the academy, the kind that kept you awake for the rest of your life. Utility versus casualty. To save the body, you sometimes had to amputate the limb. Prepare the local kill switch, I ordered. The room went deadly silent. Major, Evans hesitated. A local kill switch severs everything, not just the internet. We are talking about the handshake signals for local power generation, water filtration systems, automated transport. If we hit that switch, those islands go dark, completely dark. There are civilians there. I know who is there, I said. The image of my father's face, smug and dismissive, flashed in my mind. Then the image of Tyler's lobster. Then the image of a hospital in Los Angeles losing power because I hesitated. If we do not isolate that sector, I continued, my tone hardening, the virus hits the mainland in less than 2 hours. We risk millions of lives to preserve the comfort of a few thousand vacationers. Prepare the switch. That is an order. 5,000 miles away, the morning sun was warming the teak deck of the Sapphire Enclave's main marina. Preston Whitestone stood at the counter of the dive shop, wearing a white polo shirt that was slightly too tight around the midsection. He was trying to book a private submarine tour for the afternoon. I am sorry, Mr. Whitestone, the young woman behind the counter said, her smile faltering. The transaction was declined. Preston laughed. A short, sharp sound of disbelief. Declined? That is impossible. That is a Centurion card. It does not get declined. There is no limit. I understand, sir, she said, tapping the terminal nervously. But the machine is giving me a communication error code. It says it cannot reach the bank. Well, then it is your machine that is broken, Preston snapped. Do not blame my card. Try it again, and this time, make sure you plugged it in correctly. She swiped the heavy black metal card again. Beep, declined. I do not have time for this incompetence, Preston growled. He dug into his wallet and pulled out another card. A platinum visa. Use this one. Beep, declined. Preston's face began to flush a dangerous shade of purple. Behind him, a line of other guests was forming, murmuring impatiently. Here, Preston slammed a third card on the counter. It is your system. You people charge $5,000 a night and you cannot even keep your credit card terminals working? Meanwhile, in the royal villa, Tyler was sitting on the edge of the infinity pool, staring at his phone with growing horror. He had been trying to log into his digital wallet for 20 minutes. The Sapphire Chain app was stuck on the loading screen, a spinning blue gem that mocked him. Come on, he whispered, tapping the screen aggressively. Finally, an error message popped up. Network error, unable to sync with blockchain. No, Tyler breathed. He switched apps, trying to check his bank balance, his email, his social media. Nothing. The bars in the corner of his phone showed a signal, but no data was moving. It was a phantom signal. He stood up, pacing the deck. His entire net worth, or at least the illusion of it, was digital. If he could not access the ledger, he was not a millionaire entrepreneur. He was just a guy in swimming trunks with zero cash in his pocket. He felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. Despite the tropical heat, he could not let his parents know. If Preston found out the investor's money was inaccessible, the house of cards would collapse right here in paradise. Just a glitch, Tyler muttered to himself, forcing a smile as Linda walked out onto the terrace. Just a little server maintenance. It happens. Tyler, darling, Linda said, looking annoyed. She was wearing a silk robe and holding the villa's landline phone receiver like it was a dead rat. This phone is dead. I have been trying to call the spa for 10 minutes to move my massage to 11 o'clock. There is no dial tone. Can you use your mobile to call them? My signal is a bit spotty, too. Mom, Tyler lied. Solar flares or something. You know how it is in the middle of the ocean. Ridiculous. Linda huffed, dropping the receiver back onto the cradle. I am going to walk down to the lobby and give them a piece of my mind for what we are paying. I expect telepathy, let alone a working telephone. At base X-ray, the countdown clock on the main screen hit 0. Kill switch protocol is ready. Major, Evans reported, targeting the Pacific Southwest quadrant, localized to the independent island chains. I stood up and walked to the center of the room. I needed to do this myself. I needed to feel the weight of the key. On my mark, I said. 3, 2, 1, execute. I pressed the enter key on the master console. On the screen, the angry red lines connecting the islands to the mainland did not just fade, they severed. The graphical representation of the network traffic is flatlined. The effect at the Sapphire Enclave was not immediate. It was a cascading failure, a slow-motion car crash. First, the music stopped. The ambient jazz that piped through hidden speakers in the palm trees cut out mid-note, replaced by the sudden, jarring sound of wind and waves. Then, the air conditioning units on the roofs of the villas shuddered and fell silent. The cool, artificial breeze that kept the interiors at a perfect 68 degrees vanished. The tropical humidity began to creep in instantly. In the lobby, Preston was in the middle of shouting at the manager. "I demand you open a tab," Preston was yelling, his finger jabbing into the chest of a terrified Fijian man. "I am Preston Whitestone. My credit is good for millions. Do you think I am going to run away?" "Sir, without the system, we cannot verify." Suddenly, the lights in the lobby died. The crystal chandeliers went dark. The computer screens behind the front desk turned black. The electronic sliding doors at the entrance froze half open. A collective gasp went through the room. "What is this?" Preston demanded, looking up at the dark ceiling. "Now you are saving money on electricity? This is unacceptable." "It is a power outage, sir," the manager said, his voice trembling. "The backup generators should kick in within 10 seconds. They waited. 10 seconds passed. 20, 30, silence. The Sapphire Enclave was a smart resort. Everything was automated. The power management was controlled by a cloud-based AI to maximize efficiency. The water filtration system that turned seawater into drinking water was managed by remote servers. The electric trams that moved guests around the island were driverless and guided by GPS. When I hit the kill switch, I did not just cut the internet. I severed the brain that told the island how to breathe. The local generators were computerized. They needed a handshake signal from the main server to initialize. I had blocked that handshake. "Why are the lights not coming back on?" Linda asked, her voice shrill in the sudden quiet. She had just arrived in the lobby, expecting air conditioning, but found only stifling heat beginning to build. "I do not know," the manager stammered. He picked up a walkie-talkie. "Security, this is front desk. Report." Static, just white noise. The digital radio repeaters were down too. By the time evening approached, the confusion had curdled into fear. The sun went down, and for the first time in the resort's history, the artificial lights did not rise to meet it. The island was plunged into true, prehistoric darkness. The only light came from the moon and the flashlights on people's smartphones, which were rapidly running out of battery. The guests had gathered in the main pavilion, drawn together by a primitive instinct for safety in numbers. The veneer of civilization was thin, and without electricity, it was wearing through. "Where is the food?" a man in a tuxedo shouted. "My dinner reservation was for 7 o'clock. "The kitchens are electric," a chef emerged from the back, looking sweaty and frightened. "The stoves, the ovens, the walk-in freezers, everything is down. We cannot cook. The gas lines are controlled by electronic valves. They are shut tight." "Give us cold food then," someone yelled. "The electronic locks on the pantry are sealed," the chef admitted. "They are fail-safe locks. Without power, they bolt shut to prevent theft. We cannot get to the dry goods." Preston pushed his way to the front. "This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. I will own this island by the time my lawyers are done with you." "Dad, stop," Tyler hissed, grabbing his father's arm. Tyler looked pale in the harsh light of a phone beam. My phone is dead. I cannot check the markets. We need to get off this island. Now. Do not be ridiculous. Preston shook him off. We are not leaving until I get a refund. You do not understand. Tyler's voice cracked. It is not just the lights, the electronic toilets in the villas. They do not flush without power. The water? It comes from the desalination plant. That needs power. Dad, there is no water. There is no food. And we are stuck on a rock in the middle of the ocean. Linda let out a small whimper. No water? But I need to wash my face. Forget your face, Linda, Preston snapped, the stress finally cracking his composure. Tyler, what do you mean we are stuck? We take the seaplane. The seaplane needs GPS to navigate the reef at night, Tyler said. And the pilots, I heard them talking, they cannot contact the mainland. They are grounded. Back at the base, I watched the telemetry. The virus was contained. The mainland grid was holding. I had saved the western interconnection. I had saved the hospitals, the traffic lights, the respirators in the neonatal units. Target sector is completely offline, Evans reported. 0 electromagnetic emissions detected from the Sapphire Enclave. I leaned back in my chair. I imagined the scene. I knew that resort. I had studied its schematics when I identified it as a threat node. It was a gilded cage, without the digital pulse that kept it alive. It was just a collection of expensive furniture on a desert island. They wanted to be special. They wanted to be isolated from the common problems of the world. Now, they were... Good work, I said to the room. Maintain the blockade. Nothing goes in or out of that network until we scrub every line of code. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. It tasted like victory. My family was currently experiencing the one thing they had spent their entire lives avoiding: consequences. Major, Evans asked quietly, how long do we keep them dark? Until the threat is neutralized, I said. Could be 24 hours, could be 48. They are going to panic, Evans noted. Panic is a luxury, I said, staring at the black void on the map where my family used to be. Survival is mandatory. Let them see if they can tell the difference. On the island, the darkness was absolute. The sounds of the jungle, usually suppressed by the hum of machinery, seemed to grow louder. Somewhere in the distance, glass shattered. A scream, not of pain, but of pure frustration, echoed over the water. The prison walls had closed in, and they were made of silence and shadow. The sun rose over the Sapphire Enclave with a mocking brilliance. It was the kind of morning that travel brochures promised. Golden light spilling over turquoise waters, palm fronds swaying in a gentle trade wind. But the smell was wrong. Instead of the scent of blooming frangipani and fresh brewed Kona coffee, the air hung heavy with the stench of stagnation. Without the humming electric pumps of the circulation systems, the decorative koi ponds had gone still and murky. The infinity pools, once crystal-clear sheets of glass, were collecting debris, but the true horror was drifting from the kitchens. The massive walk-in freezers, which held thousands of pounds of Wagyu beef, lobster tails, and delicate foie gras, had been silent for 12 hours in the tropical heat. The smell of thawing, spoiling luxury was beginning to permeate the resort. I was not there to smell it, but I knew the science of rot, and I knew my family, for Preston, Linda, and Tyler. The morning did not bring hope. It brought the realization that the nightmare had not ended with the sunrise. Linda woke up in a pool of sweat. The climate control system in the royal villa was dead, and the modern glass architecture, designed to trap light, had turned their suite into a greenhouse. She reached for the bedside tablet to summon housekeeping. Tapping the screen furiously, it remained a black, lifeless slate. "Preston," she hissed, shaking my father. "Preston, I am thirsty. Call room service. Tell them to bring ice water, buckets of it." Preston groaned. Sitting up, his silk pajamas were clinging to his back. He swung his legs out of bed and stomped toward the bathroom. He turned the gold-plated faucet. Nothing. not even a hiss of air. The desalination plant had shut down the moment I severed the connection. The water pressure in the pipes had bled out overnight. "Damn it!" Preston shouted, slamming his hand against the marble vanity. "Is there no competence on this island?" They stumbled out into the main living area, where Tyler was already awake. He was curled in a fetal position on the imported Italian sofa, clutching his dead phone like a religious artifact. "It is still down," Tyler whispered, his eyes wide and bloodshot. "No signal, no data. I cannot check the ledger. I cannot see the price." "Forget the price," Preston barked. "We need water. Let us go to the main lodge. I'm going to have the manager fired. I will buy this island just to fire him." They made their way along the wooden boardwalks toward the central pavilion. They were not alone. From every villa, guests were emerging like zombies in designer sleepwear. The veneer of polite society was already beginning to crack. In the lobby, the scene was one of developing chaos. The heat was stifling. Without the ventilation fans, the high-ceilinged room trapped the humidity. A crowd of about 50 guests had gathered around the front desk, their voices rising in a cacophony of entitlement and fear. "I need to call my broker. My insulin needs refrigeration. Where is the breakfast buffet?" The hotel manager, a man whose professional smile had completely vanished, stood behind the counter with 2 security guards. They looked exhausted. "Please," the manager shouted, holding up his hands. "We are doing everything we can. The engineers are working on the generators. We ask for your patience." "I do not have patience," a woman screamed. "I have thirst." Preston pushed his way to the front. Using his shoulders to shove a tech CEO aside, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick clip of cash, $100 bills, crisp and fresh from the bank. "Listen to me," Preston announced, his voice booming with the authority he used in boardrooms. "I want 6 bottles of mineral water, sparkling, and I want a satellite phone link established immediately." He peeled off 5 bills and slapped them onto the counter. $500. "For the water?" The manager looked at the money, then he looked at Preston with an expression of profound pity. "Sir," the manager said quietly, "we have no water to sell. The vending machines are electronic and locked. The pantry doors are sealed. And that money? It is just paper." "It is legal tender," Preston roared. He peeled off 5 more bills. $1,000. Take it." "I cannot eat paper, Mr. Whitestone," the manager said, "and neither can my staff. We have not had water since last night either." Preston stood there, the cash in his hand fluttering slightly in the stagnant air. For the first time in his life, his money was not a tool, it was not a weapon, it was just colored cotton fiber blend with pictures of dead men on it. Behind him, the crowd shifted. A murmur went through the room. "It is a war," someone whispered. "That is why the satellites are down. The Russians? The Chinese?" "I heard it was an EMP," another voice said, trembling. "Nuclear detonation in the upper atmosphere. The whole world is dark. We are the only ones left." The rumor spread like wildfire. Fueled by isolation and ignorance, they had no news, no Twitter, no CNN. Their imaginations filled in the blanks with the worst possible scenarios. Hysteria began to set in. "We are going to die here," Linda sobbed, clutching Preston's arm. "We are going to die on this rock." "Shut up, Linda," Preston snapped, though his own hands were shaking. Just then, Sterling, the venture capitalist from the night before, spotted Tyler. Sterling looked rough. His linen suit was rumpled, and he looked like he hadn't slept. He marched over to Tyler, grabbing him by the shoulder. "You," Sterling growled. "Whitestone, you said your system was decentralized. You said it was immune to grid failure. I transferred $2 million into your Sapphire chain yesterday morning. I want it back. I want to buy a boat from one of the locals and get out of here." Tyler shrank back, his back hitting a pillar. "Sterling, hey, listen, the funds are safe. They are on the blockchain. We just need an internet connection to access the keys." "You do not have the keys?" Sterling shouted. attracting the attention of other investors in the room. "You told me you had cold storage. You told me it was accessible offline." It is, Tyler stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "But the app, the interface needs a handshake signal." "He is a fraud!" Sterling yelled to the room. "The kid is a fraud! He cannot move the money!" The mood in the room shifted from fear to anger. People who were terrified needed a target, and Tyler was suddenly the most convenient one. "He scammed us!" someone shouted. "Get him!" Preston stepped in front of Tyler, puffing out his chest. "Back off. My son is a financial genius. You people are just too stupid to understand the technology." While the rich argued over imaginary money, the real power on the island made a move. The staff, the waiters, the maids, the groundskeepers had been gathered in the shadows, whispering among themselves. They were locals, mostly. They knew the island. They knew where the freshwater springs were deep in the jungle. They knew how to fish without electric reels. They looked at the screaming, sweating tourists in their useless diamonds and decided they had had enough. One by one, they took off their name tags. They placed them on the tables. "Where are you going?" Linda shrieked as she saw a maid walking toward the exit. "My room is a mess. The towels need changing." The maid stopped. She looked at Linda, then at the chaos in the lobby. She said nothing. She simply turned and walked out the door, heading toward the staff boats at the far dock. "They are leaving," the manager realized, panic finally breaking his calm. "They are going back to the main island, to their families." "You cannot leave," Preston bellowed. "I forbid it. I will sue you. I will have you arrested." Nobody listened. The staff flowed out of the resort like water, taking their knowledge of survival with them. Within 10 minutes, the guests were alone. The realization hit them hard. There was no one to cook, no one to clean, no one to tell them what to do. Then came the final indignity. A loud click-clack echoed from the hallway leading to the VIP villas. A guest ran into the lobby, panting. The doors locked." "What?" "The battery backups on the smart locks died." The guest gasped. "The failsafe engaged. The bolts through. We are locked out of our rooms." Preston's face went white. "My medicine is in there. My blood pressure pills. Everything is in there," the guest cried. "My passport. My jewelry." The Sapphire Enclave had turned its guests into refugees. They were locked out of their shelters, cut off from their supplies, and trapped in the common area. "We stay here," a man said, taking charge. He was a CEO of a logistics company, a man used to order. "We secure the lobby. We ration the water bottles in the minibar behind the desk." "Who put you in charge?" Preston challenged. Stepping forward, the heat and the lack of water were making him aggressive. "I am Preston Whitestone. I own more square footage in Manhattan than you have ever seen. I will take charge of the distribution." He reached for a bottle of sparkling water that was sitting on the counter, one of the few remaining. "Put it down, Whitestone," the CEO warned. "I am taking this for my wife," Preston sneered, "and you are not going to stop me." He uncapped the bottle, the hiss of escaping gas sounding like a gunshot in the silent room. That was the breaking point. Sterling, the investor who had lost $2 million to Tyler's phantom project, stepped forward. He did not yell. He did not threaten. He swung. His fist connected with Preston's jaw with a sickening crunch. Preston stumbled back, his legs tangling in the expensive Persian rug. He fell heavily, the bottle of water flying from his hand and spilling its precious contents onto the floor. The room went deadly silent. Preston Whitestone lay on the floor, cupping his jaw. Blood trickled from his lip. He looked up, expecting to see security rushing to his aid. He expected to see lawyers materializing to serve subpoenas. He expected the world to stop because he had been hurt, but no one moved. No one helped him up. Linda screamed, but it was a thin, weak sound. Tyler cowered behind a potted plant, too terrified to defend his father. Sterling stood over Preston, rubbing his bruised knuckles. "Your net worth is 0 here, Preston," Sterling said, his voice cold and flat. "You are just an old man stealing water." Preston looked around the circle of faces. He saw contempt. He saw hunger. He saw the primal law of the jungle reflecting in the eyes of people he used to consider his peers, for the first time in 60 years. Preston Whitestone felt small. He realized that without his bank account, without his title, without the invisible army of society to protect him, he was nothing. He scrambled backward, crab-walking away from Sterling, wiping the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. He looked at the puddle of spilled water on the floor, water he had wasted in a moment of arrogance. Outside, the sun beat down on the sapphire roof of their prison, baking them in their own helplessness. The broadcast was coming, but for now, the silence was the loudest thing on earth. 36 hours. That was how long it had taken for the veneer of civilization to completely dissolve at the Sapphire Enclave. I was not there to witness it in person, but I saw the security footage later. I studied the grainy, low-light recordings recovered from the resort's backup servers with the same clinical detachment I used to analyze satellite telemetry. I watched my family rot. For 36 hours. The heat had been the primary enemy. Without the electric hum of the air conditioning, the lobby of the resort had transformed into a convection oven. The high glass walls, designed to offer panoramic views of the ocean, now acted as a magnifying glass, trapping the tropical sun and baking the air inside to a stifling 100 degrees. The smell was the second enemy. The resort's plumbing, reliant on electronic pumps and smart sensors, had ceased to function. The toilets in the guest villas had backed up hours ago, forcing the guests to relieve themselves in the ornamental bushes outside or, worse, in the corners of the locked corridors, the stench of unwashed bodies, expensive perfume turning sour in the heat, and rising sewage mixed with the rotting food from the unpowered kitchens. It was the scent of a collapsed society. My father, Preston Whitestone, sat in the corner of the lobby, his back pressed against a decorative column made of imported Italian marble. He looked less like a titan of industry and more like a shipwreck survivor. His white linen shirt was stained with sweat and dirt. A dark purple bruise blossomed across his jawline where Sterling had punched him, a physical brand of his loss of status. He did not speak. He just stared at the floor, his lips moving silently, perhaps calculating a net worth that no longer mattered. Beside him, my mother, Linda, was unrecognizable. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, hung in limp, greasy strands around her face. She was fanning herself with a laminated menu from the restaurant, her eyes darting around the room with the skittish fear of a trapped animal. She was thirsty. Everyone was thirsty. The few bottles of water that had been scavenged were gone, and the guests were now eyeing the murky water in the lobby fountain with desperate intent. And Tyler, my brother, sat with his knees pulled to his chest, his head resting on them. He was still clutching his dead phone. It was a talisman, a useless brick of glass and lithium that he could not let go of. He had stopped talking about the sapphire chain. He had stopped talking about live streaming. He was just a boy in the dark, waiting for someone to fix the world. The sun had set an hour ago, plunging the island into a darkness so absolute it felt physical. The only sounds were the crying of a child in the distance and the rhythmic, mocking crash of the waves against the shore. Then, the miracle happened. It started as a cough, a deep, mechanical sputter from the bowels of the resort. Chug, chug, whirr. The ground vibrated slightly. Somewhere in the utility complex, a backup diesel generator, one that had been overlooked or manually bypassed by the remaining maintenance staff, kicked into life. It was not enough to power the villas or the pumps or the lights. It was a dying gasp of energy. But in the center of the lobby, the massive 80-inch OLED screen mounted on the wall flickered. The room went deadly silent. A collective gasp rose from the huddle of dirty, exhausted millionaires, like moths drawn to a flame. They scrambled to their feet. The lethargy of dehydration vanished, replaced by the desperate need for information. They stumbled over furniture and each other, pushing and shoving to get closer to the blue glow. "It is working!" someone screamed. "The TV is working!" Preston grabbed Linda's arm, hauling her up. The silence that descended upon the lobby of the Sapphire Enclave was not merely the absence of noise, it was a physical weight. A suffocating blanket of heavy, humid air that pressed against the eardrums and settled deep into the lungs. The backup generator was still humming, a low, thrumming heartbeat that kept the massive screen on the wall alive. But for the hundreds of people gathered there, time had stopped. The world had narrowed down to that rectangle of blue light, in the corner of the room, huddled near a potted palm that was beginning to brown from lack of water. My family stood frozen. It was as if a chemical fixative had been sprayed over them, locking them in a tableau of absolute shattering disbelief. I watched the security footage of this moment later, frame by frame. I saw the exact second the reality of who I was collided with the fantasy they had constructed about me. Linda was the first to break. Though she did not make a sound, her hand, trembling and covered in the grime of 3 days without a shower, rose slowly to cover her mouth. It was an instinctive gesture, a subconscious attempt to hold back a scream or perhaps to hide the sudden, violent reshaping of her worldview. Her eyes were wide, the pupils dilated so large that the irises were almost invisible. She stared at the woman on the screen, the woman with the same cheekbones, the same jawline, but with eyes that held a fire Linda had never possessed, and she stopped breathing. Preston stood beside her. He was blinking rapidly, a tic I had only ever seen when the stock market crashed or a merger failed. He raised a hand to rub his eyes, digging his knuckles into the sockets as if trying to scrub away the hallucination. "It is not possible," he mumbled. His voice was a dry rasp, barely audible over the hum of the generator. No, she works in an office. She is an administrator." He looked around, as if seeking validation from the crowd, pleading for someone to tell him that this was a deep fake, a prank, a mistake. "She fixes printers," Preston whispered, the words tumbling out like jagged stones. "She stares at a computer. She is nobody." But the image on the screen remained. The camera angle shifted slightly, zooming in on the figure at the podium, on the screen. I was not the daughter who wore baggy sweaters to hide from her mother's criticism. I was not the sister who stayed silent while her brother mocked her. I was Lieutenant Colonel Sage Whitestone. The chyron at the bottom of the screen scrolled slowly, the white letters stark against the blue background. The text was crisp, authoritative, and undeniable. Colonel Sage Whitestone, Director, National Satellite Security Strategy. Commander, Joint Task Force, Orbital Defense. The title seemed to hang in the air. Mocking Preston. Colonel, not Major. I had been field promoted hours ago by the Secretary of Defense, a detail my family would never understand the weight of. Director, Commander. On the screen, I was speaking. My voice was amplified by the lobby speakers, filling the space with a cadence that was calm, precise, and terrifyingly controlled. "The integrity of the North American grid has been secured," I said to the world. "We are currently tracking the residual viral packets in the oceanic sectors. I have authorized the deployment of the 52nd Cyber Warfare Squadron to scrub the infected nodes." I paused on screen, looking down at my notes, then back up at the camera. The movement was fluid, practiced. It was the body language of someone who was used to being listened to. "Citizens in the affected evacuation zones must adhere to the protocols sent to their emergency devices," I continued. "Do not attempt to access the banking network until the all-clear is given. We are prioritizing life support infrastructure. All non-essential data traffic remains suspended." The camera held on my face. My eyes were cold, scanning the teleprompter. But to the people in the lobby, it looked like I was scanning their souls. "She is in charge," a whisper rippled through the crowd. It started near the front, where the logistics CEO was standing. He turned to his wife, pointing at the screen. "Look at the ribbons. Look at the insignia. She is not just reading a script. She is the one giving the orders. She is the savior. Thank God, a woman wept, clasping her hands together. A woman in charge. She looks like she knows what she's doing. Look at her eyes. She's going to get us out of here. Colonel Whitestone, another man repeated, testing the name on his tongue. I have heard of her. I read an article in Foreign Policy magazine last year about a rising star in the Space Force. They called her the architect of the Iron Dome. I thought it was just hype. It is not hype, someone else replied. She just saved the mainland. Did you hear the president? He stepped aside for her. He gave her the floor. The admiration in the room was palpable. It was a worshipful reverence born of desperation. These wealthy, powerful people, stripped of their comforts and terrified for their lives, had found a new god to pray to, and her name was Sage. The irony was sharp enough to cut glass. Then, the inevitable happened. A man standing near the Whitestones turned. He was a tall, imposing figure, a hedge fund manager who had spent the last 2 days hoarding almond packets. He looked at Preston, then at the screen, and then back at Preston. Whitestone, the man said. The name carried across the silent corner of the lobby. Preston froze. He felt the gaze of the man, and then the gaze of the woman beside him, and then the gaze of 10 others. The attention of the room began to pivot from the screen to the dirty, bruised man in the linen shirt. Your name is Whitestone, the man said, narrowing his eyes. I heard you yelling at the manager yesterday. You said you were Preston Whitestone. Preston opened his mouth. His throat was dry as dust. He wanted to speak. He wanted to straighten his spine, puff out his chest, and declare, yes, that is my daughter. I raised her. I made her who she is. He wanted to claim the glory. It was his instinct. It was his nature. But as he looked at the screen, a memory flashed in his mind with the violence of a strobe light. He saw the dinner table. He saw the check for $500 sliding across the mahogany. He heard his own voice, dripping with condensation and cruelty. You are basically a glorified call center worker. You look like you just clocked out of a warehouse shift. He saw the way he had laughed when Tyler called her a cosplay soldier. He saw the boarding passes. 3 tickets. The shame rose up inside him like bile. It was hot and acidic. If he claimed her now, if he said, she is my daughter, the next question would be, then why is she saving the world while you are rotting here? Why did the savior of the Republic leave her own father in a blackout? To claim her was to admit that she had abandoned him, and to admit she had abandoned him was to admit that he deserved it. Preston, the man pressed, stepping closer. That is Colonel Whitestone. Are you related? Is she your niece? Your cousin? Preston's lips trembled. He looked at Linda. She was shaking her head slightly, her eyes pleading with him not to say it, not to invite the scrutiny. Preston croaked. The man waited. The crowd waited. They were looking for a connection, a lifeline. If this man knew the savior, maybe he could get them water. Maybe he could get them a boat. Preston looked at me on the screen. I looked back. Impassive, invincible. Preston lowered his head. His shoulders collapsed. The titan of industry, the man who built towers, crumbled into a pile of old bones and regret. No, Preston whispered. What? The man asked. No, Preston said, louder this time, but his voice was hollow. It must be a common name. I do not know her. He lied. He denied me. Not out of arrogance this time, but out of a cowardice so profound it made him nauseous. He could not face the reflection of his own failure in the eyes of these strangers. Tyler, sitting on the floor, let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. He looked up at the screen. He was looking at my uniform. He remembered his words. Star Wars stuff. Pew pew, laser beams. He looked at the tactical map behind me on the screen, showing the orbital trajectories of the satellite defense grid. He saw the complex web of data that protected the planet from total darkness. It is a shield, Tyler whispered to himself. He looked at his hands, soft and uncalloused. hands that had never built anything, never protected anything. Then he looked at the woman on the screen, encased in the blue uniform that he had called a costume. It was never a costume, Tyler realized. The thought crashed into his mind with the force of a revelation. It was armor. She was wearing armor the whole time. He looked at his father, the man who had just denied his own blood to save his pride. He looked at his mother, who was staring at the floor, unable to look at the screen anymore. Tyler realized then that they were not the main characters of this story. They were not even the villains. They were just the background noise that the hero had finally tuned out. On the screen, I began to wrap up my briefing. "The United States Space Force remains vigilant," I said. "We are the guardians of the high ground. Stay safe, stay calm. Whitestone out." I saluted. The motion was crisp, sharp, a blade slicing through the air. And then, as if on cue, the generator outside gave one final, deathly shudder. The screen flickered, my face distorted for a fraction of a second, stretching into a digital ghost. Zap! The blue light vanished. The lobby was plunged back into darkness. But the silence that followed was different now. Before, it had been the silence of waiting. Now, it was the silence of judgment, in the dark. Preston Whitestone closed his eyes, but the image of the torn check burned on the inside of his eyelids. He had offered $500 to a woman who held the sun in her hands, and now, sitting in the dark, he would have given every cent of his fortune just to hear her voice say "Dad" one more time. But the dark was silent, and the distance between the lobby and the control room was measured not in miles, but in the light years of respect he had never thought to give. The briefing room lights were hot, a stark contrast to the glacial temperature of the blood running through my veins. I stood at the podium, the presidential seal behind me, looking out at a sea of journalists who were hungry for a soundbite, for a hero, or for a scapegoat. They wanted reassurance. They wanted to be told that the American way of life, the convenience, the speed, the endless consumption, was safe. I had given them the strategic overview. I had given them the technical breakdown. Now came the human element, the part of the job that usually broke lesser commanders. "We have time for 3 questions, I announced. My voice did not waver. I had spent 10 years training for this. I had simulated global thermonuclear war, orbital collision cascades, and total grid collapse. Managing a room full of reporters was simple by comparison. A hand shot up in the front row. A correspondent from a major cable network, a man known for his aggressive questioning regarding government accountability. "Colonel Whitestone," he barked, standing up. "You mentioned that the mainland is secure, but reports are flooding in from the Pacific. Specifically, there are thousands of American citizens currently stranded on private islands and luxury resorts, places like the Sapphire Enclave, Bora Bora private atolls, and the Amman clusters. These people are reportedly without power, water, or communication. They are trapped. What is the Space Force doing to rescue them?" The room went quiet. It was the question that every populist outlet wanted answered. Why were the rich being left to rot? 5,000 miles away, in the stifling, sweat-drenched lobby of the Sapphire Enclave, the dying generator gave a mighty, desperate heave. The screen, which had flickered ominously, surged back to full brightness. The audio crackled, then cleared. Preston Whitestone scrambled forward, his knees scraping against the marble floor. He grabbed the edge of the television console as if it were the railing of a lifeboat. "This is it," Preston rasped, turning to the crowd behind him. His eyes were wild, manic with sudden hope. "Did you hear him? He asked about us. He asked about the Sapphire Enclave." "She will send the Navy," Linda cried out, clutching her chest. "She is my daughter. She knows we are here. She is going to send the carriers. We are going to be saved." The crowd in the lobby surged forward again. The anger that had been directed at Preston moments ago evaporated, replaced by a desperate, fawning need. If this man was the father of the commander, then he was their ticket out of hell. "Tell her, Mr. Whitestone, someone shouted at the screen. Tell her to bring the helicopters. Sage, Preston screamed at the pixels of my face. Sage, baby, it is Daddy. We are here. We are dying. Get us out of here. On the screen, I looked down at the reporter. I did not blink. I did not consult my notes. The answer was already codified in the crisis management protocols I had written myself 2 years ago. The United States military operates on a doctrine of triage, I said. My voice was level, stripping away any possibility of misinterpretation. Our primary directive is the preservation of critical national infrastructure and the protection of high-density population centers. We are currently deploying assets to restore power to hospitals in Honolulu, Guam, and Okinawa. But what about the private sectors? The reporter pressed. These are citizens with significant resources who are completely cut off. I looked directly into the camera lens. I imagined I was looking through the glass, across the ocean, and straight into the eyes of the man who had thrown a $500 check at me. Private luxury resorts, I said, enunciating every syllable, are by definition located in geographically isolated regions to ensure privacy. They operate on independent, non-standardized power grids. In a crisis of this magnitude, logistical efficiency is paramount. We cannot divert a carrier strike group or a squadron of rescue helicopters to retrieve a handful of individuals from a private vacation zone when millions in urban centers are at risk. Preston's hands slipped from the console. He stared at the screen, his mouth working silently. Therefore, I continued, delivering the verdict. Private enclaves will be placed at the bottom of the priority list for extraction. We advise those citizens to shelter in place and ration their supplies. Assistance will arrive when the primary threat vectors are neutralized. That may be 48 hours. It may be a week. A week? Linda shrieked. The sound was like glass breaking. We have no water. Sage, you cannot do this. She is leaving us, Tyler whispered. He was the only one who seemed to understand. She is not coming. The mood in the lobby turned instantly. It was violent and ugly. The crowd realized that the Whitestone connection was not a lifeline. It was an anchor. You said she would help, the logistics CEO shouted, grabbing Preston by the collar of his ruined shirt. You said she was your daughter. Why is she leaving us to die? I do not know, Preston stammered, tears of frustration and terror streaking the dirt on his face. She has to follow orders. She is the one giving the orders, the CEO roared, shoving Preston backward. On the screen, the reporter was sitting down, satisfied with the grim answer, but I was not done. I raised a hand, silencing the room. However, I said, the word hung in the air, in the lobby. Everyone froze. However, a word of exception, a word of hope. Preston scrambled back up. See? See? He pointed at the screen, his voice cracking. There is a plan. I told you. She has a plan for us. There is one exception to this operational protocol, I said. My expression hardened, shifting from administrative coldness to the sharp, predatory focus of a hunter. While we are not deploying rescue assets to these private islands, we are deploying tactical containment teams. Containment? Tyler murmured. The word sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Intelligence indicates that the malware used to attack the global grid did not originate from a hostile nation-state. I explained. It originated from a decentralized network of private servers hosted in non-extradition zones. Specifically, we have traced the command and control signal to a server farm located in the basement of the Sapphire Enclave. The silence in the lobby was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I watched the camera tally light turn red. The Sapphire Enclave, I said, is not just a resort. Our data suggests it is a hub for unregulated cryptocurrency exchanges and illicit data laundering. The malware utilized the massive bandwidth of that resort to amplify its signal. Tyler Whitestone stopped breathing, his face drained of all color. Turning the shade of old parchment, the sapphire chain, his revolutionary project. He had bragged about the resort's bandwidth. He had bragged about the decentralized servers. He had convinced his investors that their money was safe because it was hosted off-grid. He had not known he was building a weapon, or perhaps, in his willful ignorance, he had simply chosen not to ask why the server fees were so cheap. Consequently, I said, my voice dropping an octave, I have authorized the deployment of SEAL Team 6 and the Cybercrimes Division to the Sapphire Enclave. They are en route now via high-speed insertion craft. They are coming! Linda sobbed with relief. Oh, thank God! They are coming! No, Mom, Tyler whispered. He stood up, backing away from the group. They are not coming for us. But she said SEAL Team 6, Linda insisted. Their mission is not rescue, I said on the screen, driving the final nail into the coffin of their delusion. Their mission is to seize the servers, secure the digital evidence, and detain any individuals associated with the administration or financial backing of these illegal networks. This is a raid. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. If you are on that island and you are innocent, stay out of the way. If you are involved in the financing or maintenance of the Sapphire Chain infrastructure, know this: we are coming for you, and there is nowhere left to hide. Whitestone out, I stepped away from the podium. The broadcast feed cut. In the lobby of the Sapphire Enclave, the generator finally gave up the ghost, with a sound like a dying beast. It shuddered and ceased. The screen went black for the last time, but the darkness was no longer the problem. Every head in the room turned toward Tyler. The investors. The people who had given him millions, Sterling, the man who had punched Preston. They all looked at the boy who had promised them a decentralized paradise. Sapphire Chain, Sterling said. His voice was low, dangerous. She said Sapphire Chain. It is a coincidence, Tyler stammered, backing up until he hit the glass wall of the lobby. It is just a name. I did not know. I swear, I did not know they were using the servers for a virus. You brought us here, the logistics CEO growled, stepping forward. You told us this was the safest place on Earth for our money, and now the United States military is coming to treat us like terrorists because of you? Dad, Tyler shrieked, looking at Preston. Dad, tell them I am innocent. Preston Whitestone stood in the center of the room. He looked at his son. He looked at the angry mob encircling them. For the second time that hour, Preston made a calculation. He is 29, Preston said to the mob. Preston! Linda gasped. He is 29, Preston repeated, his voice devoid of paternal warmth. He runs his own company. I am just an investor. I did not know what he was doing. If he broke the law, that is on him. Dad? Tyler's voice was a whisper of betrayal. Do not look at me, Preston spat. You dragged us into this. You and your stupid fake money. If Sage is sending a SEAL team, I am not going to prison for your incompetence. The mob descended. They did not kill him. They were too civilized for that, and perhaps too thirsty to expend the energy. But they grabbed Tyler. They zip-tied his hands with a luggage strap. They shoved him into a chair. We hold him for the SEALs, Sterling ordered. Maybe if we hand him over, the colonel will give us water. Preston stepped back, pulling Linda with him into the shadows. He had sacrificed his daughter for his ego, and now he had sacrificed his son for his safety. He was a man who would burn down the world to keep his own shirt clean. But as he stood in the dark, listening to his son sob, Preston realized something terrifying. Sage was coming, not to save him, not to hug him. She was coming as the hammer of God, and for the first time in his life, Preston Whitestone was not the one holding the handle. He was the nail. The extraction team arrived exactly 4 hours after the broadcast ended, from my perch in the command center at Base X-Ray. I watched the operation unfold on a wall of high-definition monitors. The feed was being relayed in real time from the helmet cameras of the operators and the nose-mounted optics of the aircraft. It was a strange, dissociative experience. I was sitting in a climate-controlled room in Nevada. drinking lukewarm black coffee, while 5,000 miles away. The wind from my rotors was flattening the palm trees of the Sapphire Enclave. "Birds are 1 minute out," the communications officer announced. "LZ is hot. We have civilians in the open." "Rules of engagement are active," I said into my headset. "Non-lethal force only. Secure the target structure, contain the servers, detain the primary suspects." On the main screen, I saw them. 2 MH-60 Black Hawk helicopters tore through the tropical twilight, their silhouettes blacker than the sky behind them. They did not approach with the polite banking maneuvers of a tourist charter. They came in low and fast, aggressive and loud, banking hard over the lagoon. The guests of the Sapphire Enclave, who had spent the last 2 days starving and arguing over water, looked up. Through the grainy resolution of the drone feed, I saw their reactions. They waved their arms. They jumped up and down. They screamed. To them, the roar of the engines was the sound of salvation. They thought the cavalry had arrived to bring them room service. They were wrong. The lead helicopter flared, hovering just 10 feet above the pristine white sand of the main beach. Ropes dropped. "Go! Go! Go!" 12 operators from the Cybercrimes Division and Naval Special Warfare Group slid down the lines. They hit the sand with practiced precision. Weapons raised, scanning the perimeter. They were not wearing the crisp dress blues I wore on television. They were in full tactical gear. Helmets, night vision mounts, body armor, and suppressed rifles. They looked like terrifying, faceless machines. The crowd of guests surged forward. It was a stampede of entitlement. "We are here!" I heard a woman scream over the audio feed. "Take me first! I have a platinum membership!" "Back!" a soldier bellowed, his voice amplified by a loudspeaker. "Clear the landing zone! Get back!" The soldiers formed a perimeter, pushing the crowd back not with handshakes, but with the barrels of their rifles. This was not a rescue mission. It was a raid. I switched my view to the body camera of the team leader, Captain Miller. The camera shook as he moved through the sand, ignoring the weeping millionaires clutching at his uniform. Then I saw him. Preston Whitestone broke through the line of guests. He looked like a madman. His linen shirt was torn, revealing sunburned skin. His face was unshaven, his eyes wild with a mixture of terror and arrogance. He ran straight toward Captain Miller, waving his arms frantically. "Hey! Hey!" Preston screamed, grabbing the captain's arm. "I am Preston Whitestone. Do you hear me? I am the father." Captain Miller stopped. Through his camera, I saw my father's face up close. It was distorted by the wide-angle lens, making his desperation look even more grotesque. "I am the father of Colonel Whitestone," Preston yelled, pointing at the sky as if I were floating there personally. "She sent you to me, I know she did. Get me on that chopper. I demand to be taken to the mainland immediately." "Sir, release my arm," Captain Miller said. His voice was calm, robotic, filtered through the tactical radio. "You do not understand," Preston spat, tightening his grip. "My daughter is your boss. If you do not put me on that seat, I will have you court-martialed. I will have you stripped of your rank. Now move your men and get my wife." I watched from 5,000 miles away. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a cold appreciation for the chain of command. Captain Miller did not argue. He did not hesitate. He simply initiated a standard crowd control maneuver. He drove the butt of his rifle into Preston's chest, not hard enough to break ribs, but hard enough to knock the wind out of a 60-year-old man. Preston gasped, stumbling backward and falling onto the sand. "Back off, sir," Captain Miller barked. "This is a military operation, not a commercial flight. You are interfering with a federal investigation. Stay on the ground, or you will be zip-tied." Preston lay in the sand, wheezing, looking up at the soldier with utter shock. He had played his ace card, my name, and it had been slapped out of his hand. "Team 2, secure the server room," I ordered from Nevada. "Team 1, locate the target, Tyler Whitestone." "Copy. Command," Miller replied. The camera view swung around. The team moved past the sobbing guests. marching straight toward the lobby where the mob had been holding my brother. They found him sitting in a chair, his hands already bound by the luggage straps Sterling had used. Tyler looked up as the soldiers approached. He did not look relieved. He looked like a man watching his executioner arrive. "Tyler Whitestone?" Captain Miller asked. "I did not know," Tyler blubbered, tears streaming down his face. "I just rented the servers. I did not write the code." "Tyler Whitestone," Miller repeated, ignoring the plea. "You are being detained under the Espionage Act and the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Your servers were identified as the primary relay node for a cyberkinetic attack on the United States infrastructure." Two soldiers hauled Tyler to his feet. They cut the luggage strap and replaced it with heavy-duty plastic flex cuffs. They tightened them until Tyler winced. "Mom!" Tyler screamed, his voice cracking. "Mom, help me!" Linda Whitestone came running from the edge of the crowd. She threw herself at the soldiers, grabbing at their vests. "No, he is a baby!" she shrieked. "He is a businessman! Let him go! Sage! Sage! Where are you? Tell them to stop!" She looked around wildly, scanning the soldiers, scanning the helicopter doors, expecting to see me step out like a deus ex machina. "Sage!" Linda screamed at the empty sky. "How can you let them do this? We are your family." "Control," Captain Miller said into his radio. "I have a hostile non-combatant interfering with the arrest. Requesting instructions." I leaned forward in my chair. The room in Nevada was silent. My staff was watching me. General Vance was watching me. They were waiting to see if Colonel Whitestone would crack, if the daughter would override the commander. "Captain," I said, my voice steady, "secure the perimeter and bring the comms link online. Visual confirm." "Copy," Miller said. On the beach, Miller reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a ruggedized field tablet. He tapped the screen, establishing a secure, encrypted video link via the military satellite network I had just spent 3 days fixing. "Ma'am," Miller said to Linda, his voice cutting through her hysteria. "The commander wants a word." He held the tablet up. The screen flickered for a nanosecond, and then my face appeared. I was looking down at them from the high-definition camera in my command center. I was backlit by the banks of monitors, the blue light giving me an ethereal, ghostly appearance. I was wearing my headset, my uniform perfectly crisp. Linda froze. She looked at the tablet. "Sage?" she whispered. Her hand reached out to touch the screen, but she pulled it back, afraid. Preston scrambled up from the sand. Coughing, he pushed his way next to Linda and looked into the device. "Sage!" Preston cried, his voice breaking. "Thank God. Tell these guerrillas to stand down. They hit me. They hit your father. Tell them to put Tyler on the chopper and let us go home." I looked at them. The camera feed from the tablet showed me their faces in brutal detail. I saw my father, the man who had mocked my service as playing guard, now begging for the protection of that very service. He was dirty, bruised, and small. The trite arrogance that had defined him for my entire life was gone, replaced by a pathetic, whining fear. I saw my mother, the woman who had worried that my uniform would embarrass the family, now looking at that uniform as her only hope. I saw my brother, the crypto king, cuffed and weeping, a fraud exposed by the harsh light of reality. They looked at me, and they saw a stranger. They looked for the daughter who used to fix their printers, the girl who would take the $500 check and say thank you. She was not there. In her place was Colonel Whitestone, and she had a job to do. I did not smile. I did not frown. My face was a mask of professional detachment. "Captain Miller," I said. My voice came out of the tablet speakers, clear and loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "Go ahead." "Commander," Miller said. "Is the suspect secured?" I asked. "Affirmative," Miller said, jerking a thumb at Tyler. "Target secured. Servers are being seized as we speak." "Good," I said. "Sage," Preston pleaded. "Stop talking like a robot. It is Dad. We are starving here. We need water. We need to leave. I shifted my eyes on the screen, locking gazes with Preston. For a moment, the thousands of miles vanished. Mr. Whitestone, I said. I did not call him Dad. The unit on the ground is a tactical extraction team, not a humanitarian aid relief squad. Their payload capacity is reserved for evidence and high-value detainees. Detainees? Preston whispered. But we are victims. The investigation will determine that, I said. Until then, you are civilians in a secured zone. You will wait for the Red Cross relief boats, which are scheduled to arrive in 48 hours. 48 hours? Linda wailed. We cannot stay here another minute. Look at us. You have shelter, I said coldly. You have the ocean, and I believe I saw a very expensive wine cellar on the resort schematics. You will survive. Sage, please, Preston begged, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. I am sorry, okay? Is that what you want? I am sorry about the dinner. I am sorry about the ticket. Just please don't leave us here. I watched him cry. I waited for a pang of guilt. I waited for that familiar tug of obligation that had controlled me for 30 years. It never came. All I felt was the clarity of the mission. They had chosen their world. They had chosen the luxury, the isolation, the arrogance. They had bought the ticket to the Sapphire Enclave. I was simply ensuring they got the full experience. Captain Miller, I said, breaking eye contact with my father and addressing the soldier. Yes, Colonel. Process the detainee, I ordered. Secure the evidence and ensure the civilians do not interfere with the operation. If they obstruct you again, detain them as well. Understood. Sage, Preston screamed as Miller began to lower the tablet. Sage, you cannot do this. I am your father. I looked at him one last time before the connection was cut. I know who you are, I said softly, more to myself than to him. You are a citizen, and right now, I have 300 million others to protect. Carry on. Captain, Whitestone out. The screen on the tablet went black. I sat back in my chair in Nevada. The room was deadly quiet. Cut the feed from the tablet, I told the tech officer. Keep the drone view up. On the big wall screen, I saw the scene play out from above. I saw Captain Miller put the tablet away. I saw him signal his men. I saw them drag Tyler toward the waiting helicopter. I saw Preston and Linda standing on the sand, small dots in the vastness of the Pacific. They were reaching out, shouting, but the wash of the rotor blades drowned them out. The soldiers loaded Tyler and the server racks onto the Blackhawks. The engines roared, kicking up a storm of sand that blasted my parents, forcing them to shield their eyes, the eyes that had refused to see me for so long. The helicopters lifted off, banking sharp and turning north, leaving the Sapphire Enclave behind in the gathering dark. I watched the infrared heat signatures of my parents standing on the beach. They stood there for a long time, watching the taillights of the helicopters fade into the stars. They were alone. They were powerless. And for the first time, they understood that the universe did not revolve around them. It revolved around the people who kept it spinning. Target extracted, Miller reported over the radio. Returning to base. Good work, team, I said. Get some rest when you land. I took off my headset and placed it on the desk. My hands were steady. My heartbeat was resting at 60 beats per minute. I reached for my coffee. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. It tasted like justice. The extraction of my brother was swift, violent, and devoid of the cinematic glory he had always imagined for his life. There was no slow-motion walk, no heroic soundtrack. There was just the screaming of the turbine engines, the stinging sand, and the sight of Tyler Whitestone, the self-proclaimed crypto king, being shoved into the cargo bay of a Blackhawk helicopter like a sack of compromised hard drives. I watched the infrared feed until the helicopter became a speck against the stars. And then I watched the heat signatures of my parents standing alone on the beach. They did not leave that night. My orders were absolute. The tactical teams were for evidence and high-value targets only. Preston and Linda Whitestone were neither. They were classified as displaced civilians, a category that put them at the very bottom of the logistical hierarchy. For another 48 hours, they remained on the island. They slept on the sofas in the lobby because the electronic locks on the villas never opened. They drank warm water from emergency rations distributed by the Red Cross. They sat in the dark, stripped of their luggage, their phones, and their dignity, surrounded by the very people they had tried to trample over to get to the front of the line. When the relief transport finally arrived 2 days later, it was not a private jet. It was a massive, lumbering C-130 Hercules cargo plane, repurposed for humanitarian aid. Preston and Linda were ushered into the belly of the aircraft, strapped into canvas jump seats alongside the hotel staff. The kitchen workers, and the other tourists. There was no champagne. There was only the roar of the uninsulated engines and the smell of 300 unwashed bodies. I was told later by a loadmaster that Preston tried to demand a seat in the cockpit. He was told to sit down or be zip-tied. He sat down. When the wheels touched down at Travis Air Force Base in California, the media circus was waiting. Usually, the arrival of a relief plane is a somber affair, but the narrative had shifted. The world knew about the Sapphire Chain. They knew about the virus, and they knew that the parents of the savior of the grid, Colonel Sage Whitestone, were on board. The cargo ramp lowered, bathing the interior in harsh California sunlight. My parents stumbled out, blinking. They looked like ghosts. Preston's linen suit was stained and torn. Linda was barefoot, having lost her sandals in the scramble to board. But as soon as Preston saw the wall of cameras and the forest of microphones behind the chain-link fence, a visible transformation took place. He straightened his spine. He smoothed his hair. The arrogance, which had been beaten out of him by hunger and fear, rushed back in with the oxygen. He saw an audience, and Preston Whitestone never met an audience he did not think he could manipulate. He walked toward the press pen, ignoring the Red Cross volunteers trying to guide him to the medical tent. "Mr. Whitestone," a reporter from CNN shouted. "Mr. Whitestone, over here. Do you have a statement about your son's arrest? Is it true you were stranded for 3 days? What is your relationship with Colonel Whitestone?" Preston stopped at the fence. He grabbed the wire mesh with his hands, posing like a martyr. "It was a harrowing experience," Preston began, his voice dropping into a somber, practiced register. "A test of endurance, but we survived. We are Whitestones. After all, resilience is in our blood." "Sir, what about your daughter?" another reporter asked. "Colonel Sage Whitestone orchestrated the defense of the nation. How do you feel about her role?" This was the moment. I was watching the live feed from my office at the base. I saw the gears turning in his head. He could have been humble. He could have been honest. But he chose the path of the parasite. "I am incredibly proud," Preston said, beaming. "You know, when Sage was a little girl, I always taught her the value of discipline. I pushed her. I was hard on her because I knew she had greatness in her. I like to think that the leadership she showed the world yesterday well. She got that from her father. I raised a warrior." He looked around, expecting applause. He expected the narrative to shift to him, the architect of the hero, instead. A young journalist in the front row held up her phone. She connected it to a portable speaker. "Mr. Whitestone?" she cut in, her voice sharp. "That is a lovely sentiment, but we received a data dump this morning from a group of hacktivists who accessed the Sapphire Enclave's cloud servers before they were seized. They released the security camera audio from the resort's dining room on the night before the blackout." Preston's smile faltered. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Let me refresh your memory," the journalist said. She pressed play. The sound was crystal clear. It echoed across the tarmac, picked up by every microphone in the vicinity. Preston's voice. "Boring. Boring. 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 Come on, sis. Admit it. You are basically playing video games." Linda's voice. "She probably has to go fix a printer for her boss." Preston's voice. "You are basically a glorified call center worker. You sit in a dark room staring at a computer screen. It is busy work for people who could not hack it in the real business world." Preston's voice. "I did consider inviting you, Sage, but frankly, you do not hop with the class at the Sapphire Enclave. You would embarrass yourself." The audio cut off. The silence on the tarmac was absolute. It was heavier than the silence on the island. Preston stood there, his hands still gripping the fence, his face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. He looked at the cameras. The red tally lights were all on. Millions of people, his business partners, his country club friends, his investors, had just heard him reduce the woman who saved their lives to a call center worker. Preston stammered. "That was taken out of context. We were joking. It was family banter." "You called her a failure," the journalist said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You mocked her service while you were on your way to a luxury island funded by fraud, and then, when the lights went out, you begged her to save you." The crowd of reporters did not ask any more questions. They just took pictures. They captured the image of a man whose soul had been exposed as small, petty, and infinitely hollow. Linda tried to hide her face, pulling her ruined shawl over her head, but the cameras caught her too. The model mother who cared more about appearances than her daughter's dignity was now the face of ingratitude. Preston backed away from the fence. He looked for a friendly face, but there were none. Even the other evacuees were looking at him with disgust. The stock market reacted within minutes. Whitestone real estate holdings plummeted. The board of directors called an emergency meeting and voted to remove Preston as CEO before he even left the airport. His reputation, the only currency he actually valued, was hyperinflating into worthlessness. I turned off the monitor in my office. I did not feel joy. I did not feel a rush of triumph. I felt a quiet, steady sense of completion. The circle was closed. An hour later, my aide knocked on the door. "Colonel," she said, "there is a lawyer here. Mr. Thorne. He says he represents your parents. He is asking for a meeting. He says they need help with bail money for your brother and legal counsel for the upcoming hearings." I looked at the paperwork on my desk. The after-action report for Operation Blackout was nearly finished. The world was safe. The grid was green. "Tell Mr. Thorne I am unavailable," I said, not looking up. "He says it is urgent, ma'am." The aide hesitated. "He says they are family." I signed the last page of the report. The ink was black and permanent. "I have already sent a JAG officer to ensure my brother receives a fair trial, just like any other citizen," I said. "As for my parents, tell Mr. Thorne that I am a government employee on a fixed salary. I cannot afford the kind of legal representation they require. I am sure they can pull themselves up by their bootstraps." The aide smiled, a small, knowing expression. "Yes, Colonel, I will deliver the message." She left. Closing the heavy door behind her, I stood up and walked to the main control window. The command center was humming with activity. The crisis was over. But the vigilance never stopped. The giant digital map of the world, which had been covered in angry red warning clusters just days ago, was now a soothing, solid green. Systems nominal, orbit stable, my personal phone, which I had retrieved from the safe, buzzed on the console. I picked it up. A voicemail notification. It was from Preston. I debated deleting it unheard. That would have been the easiest thing to do, but curiosity, or perhaps the need for finality, made me press play. I held the phone to my ear. Sage. The voice was unrecognizable. It was not the booming baritone of the boardroom tyrant. It was the shaking, thin voice of an old man who had lost everything. "Sage, I saw the broadcast. I heard the audio on the news. He paused. I could hear him breathing. A ragged, wet sound. "I did not know," he whispered. "I swear to you, I did not know how big you were. I did not know what you did. I am sorry. Please, call me. We have nothing left. They froze the accounts. Please." The message ended. There was no demand, no order, just a plea. I looked at the phone. "I did not know how big you were." Even in his apology, he revealed his flaw. He only respected what he feared. He only valued me now because I had power. If I were still just a major, if I were still just doing my job in the shadows, he would still be laughing at me. His regret was not for his actions, it was for his miscalculation. I looked at the options on the screen. Call back, delete, archive. I did not want to delete him. That would be pretending he never existed. And I did not want to call him. That would be inviting the infection back in. I pressed archive. I watched the message disappear from the active inbox, filed away into a digital folder of things that happened in the past, things that no longer had the power to hurt me. I put the phone down. I adjusted my uniform, smoothing the fabric over my heart. I walked to the door of the command center and pushed it open. For the first time in 4 days, I stepped out of the mountain. The blast doors of Base X-ray were open. The Nevada sun was blazing, a brilliant, blinding white light that scrubbed the world clean. The air smelled of sagebrush and dust, honest and dry. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with the air of a world I had saved. Behind me, in the break room, a television was playing the national news. The ticker at the bottom of the screen scrolled past, delivering the final footnote to the Whitestone legacy. Breaking news. Department of Justice freezes all assets of Whitestone family pending investigation into sapphire chain fraud. Colonel Whitestone releases statement. The law is equal for all citizens, including my relatives, no exceptions. They had wanted a luxury life where the rules did not apply to them. I gave them the only thing they truly deserved: equality. I walked into the sun, and I did not look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please leave a comment telling me where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you all. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel BitterSweet Drama Stories, like the video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people.